Hey everyone, and welcome to another evening of Big Ten Talk with Emily. I am super excited to be with you all tonight. I am here with Nick Rodecap, who I am super excited to talk to. Nick, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on the show. I am
Yeah.
a senior at Indiana University covering IU football for the second year. I'm a student broadcaster with WIUX Sports and Big Ten Plus. I also cover IU basketball. I've covered baseball. So been immersed in college athletics for a while, and crazy that it's taken me to Eugene, Oregon for such an incredible matchup this weekend. It's been a fun ride so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I have so many questions I want to ask you. But first, were you like born and raised a Hoosier, or did you just get into the school and like that's kind of became your team? Or like what does your journey look like to find you where you're at now?
Yeah, my dad graduated from IU in the late 80s. And so I've been in an IU family my entire life. I was born in
Okay.
Indianapolis and went to high school on the east side of Indy. And then Cathedral was, Cathedral High School was where I went. And then IU was kind of always the place that I wanted to go. First time I visited, I fell in love with the campus, and the people down in Bloomington are great. And it's been such an incredible experience. But yeah, Hoosier through and through.
I love that. That is like super awesome. I've heard such good such good things about Bloomington. I definitely hope to visit one day because it seems like a really cool college town. Even before Oregon was in the Big Ten, I heard these like good things about Bloomington. And so that's kind of what makes it super interesting and super fun now with realignment that we kind of open ourselves up to these new places to visit. As you well know, it found you in Eugene, Oregon this
Yeah.
weekend. How was your trip to Eugene? Game
It
aside, how was your trip to Eugene?
it was interesting to say the
Yeah.
least. I was wearing an IU shirt or a sweatshirt because I packed it in my bag and it was the only one I had that I could wear. On the train, getting on the plane, I got some chirps from Oregon fans when we were flying and taking the train. But the people in Eugene are great, and Oregon campus is really cool. Um, we took a walk around, I think it was the south side of Autzen. There's like that trail that goes away
Yeah.
from the stadium. And we saw police officers on horseback. The atmosphere just in and of itself was really, really neat. And I'm glad that I got to experience it.
Yeah, that is super awesome. It's probably really incredible that, like you said, you're a senior and your education has taken you to this point, not just obviously educationally, but also professionally, where you get to experience these really cool things. And it's so great that you guys have a supportive program that allows you to do that because I know not all media or journalism programs can do that for their students, especially with such a big matchup like this weekend's was.
Yeah, absolutely. I said it on the broadcast. I was on the call for WIUX Student Radio this weekend. Was lucky enough to get the second half, and my broadcast partner Ben Haller and I, we talked about how just being in the position to cover that game as a student media member, we had our lodging and our flights covered
Yeah.
by the media school, and we are so grateful that we were able to get that locked down, and for them to be able to support us and just give us the chance to do what we do best at
Right.
Autzen was incredible. And I can't thank the media school enough for that.
Yeah, that is super great. So, kind of before we get into the Big Ten overall, let's talk about Indiana and Oregon. Like you said, this was a really big matchup, a really exciting one. College game day. Did you go to any of the college game day stuff?
I did not,
Okay.
because we got in pretty late on Friday night and
Yeah.
we kind of just wanted to sleep in. But I woke up to a clip of Dan Lanning with his shirt off,
Yeah,
standing
I
on a
think a
chair
lot of
next to
people
Pat
did.
McAfee. Yeah,
I think a lot of people woke up to that specific image. It
yeah.
looks like it was a really good crowd at college game day. I saw, a few like blurbs of red in that crowd, which was really nice to see. What were your thoughts kind of overall on the game? Because I've heard many things. I've heard this is like the biggest win in program history for IU. I've heard that this is kind of just the start. Obviously, this is an improvement from the team that we saw last year in terms of the Indiana program. And so I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts. Like, what does this win mean for your program and kind of moving forward through the remainder of the regular season?
Yeah, without a doubt, this is the big picture. This is the biggest win in IU football program history. They were 0 and 46, I believe, against AP top five teams on the road all time. They only had one win. They were 1 and 72. Um, Indiana has never done this before. This is a
Yeah,
team that 2 years ago, under Tom Allen, went to 4 overtimes at home against Akron. And
right.
that game, I watched that game,
Yeah,
and it made me want to pull my hair out. I was a sophomore at the time, and I couldn't believe it. There was a clip that IU football posted after the game of them singing the fight song in the locker room, and you could tell by the players' facial expressions that the head coach, Tom Allen, had just completely lost them, and there was no buy-in whatsoever. Um, so to go from that to beating Oregon on the road in a top 10 game in less than two seasons,
yeah,
is a seismic paradigm shift. It's one that I don't think any program has ever experienced.
right.
Um, and you know the numbers: Indiana 700 plus losses, an FBS doormat for pretty much its entire existence, and the Hoosiers, they threw that narrative out the window this weekend. And to be honest, I was nervous just as a neutral spectator, as a neutral media member, because Indiana in those two environments last year, Ohio State and Notre Dame, crumbled. And quite
Yeah.
frankly, they did not play great in either of those games. And that was kind of one of the knocks on them coming in. But they took that narrative, they kicked it out the window. And this is a program altering win for Indiana.
It's probably quite surreal because, like you just mentioned, the Akron game that took place during your sophomore year, and now you're a senior. So to kind of do a complete 180 in regard to how your football program is performing and the games they are succeeding against, that's probably pretty unique, but also incredibly surreal from a student perspective.
It absolutely is. And I was thinking about this. I was actually writing a column on the train. And IU sophomores have not seen their football team lose at home as a student.
Yeah,
That's ridiculous,
right.
to be honest. And I was thinking about this standing in my broadcast position on top of the press box at Autzen and thinking, I cannot believe that this is happening, because I was at a couple games in Tom Allen's final year. I was at the Louisville game and the Purdue game, and it was just like watching a train go off the tracks in slow motion. And so to go from that to this, in the time that I've been a student at IU, there's nothing to compare it to, and it's it's honestly, it's incredible,
Yeah.
just to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you had such a good experience in Eugene. What kind of taking a look at Indiana and how they played yesterday, what impressed you the most from your team?
I was extremely impressed with their poise, with the way that they handled adversity,
Hmm.
because those were two things that were kind of unknown in these big environments going into yesterday. Because when they got punched in the mouth against Ohio State and Notre Dame, they did not get off the mat. But yesterday, they did. They had some pre-snap issues, but they fought through it. Fernando Mendoza
Right.
throws a pick six, game's tied, and what does he do? He comes right back on the field and he leads the go-ahead touchdown drive. Those are the kinds of things that Indiana players just haven't done in the past in those situations. Usually, when they're down for the count, they're done.
Right.
Um, but they handled one of the loudest environments that at least I've ever been in, certainly one of the loudest environments they played in under Kurt Signetti. And they came away, they made a huge statement, and they showed that, even if people continue to move the goalposts on them, oh, they beat the snot out of Illinois. Well, Illinois was overrated. They beat Iowa in an
Right.
ugly game on the road. Oh, well, Iowa doesn't have an offense. Oregon was heralded as a national championship contender, and they still might be. But they beat Oregon. The defense dominated up front. And it's funny because people continue to try to move the goalposts, but
Yeah.
they passed every test so far.
Yeah, this is so true. And kind of just taking a look at Indiana's remaining schedule. I don't know about you. I find it really difficult to pinpoint a game that they lose. Things happen, trap games happen. Obviously, we know this all too well. But you guys have Michigan State, UCLA, you go to Maryland, you go to Penn State, Wisconsin, and Purdue. Do you kind of agree that Indiana should win out for the remainder of the season, or do you see some challenges based on what you have seen from this team maybe last year, some concerns that you personally have that might come up later down the road this season?
It's hard to say, because on paper they're going to be favored in every game for the rest of the season. I don't think that there's any
Right.
doubt about that.
Right.
Now, at the start of the year, we circled Oregon and Penn State, of course.
Yeah.
Penn State, in the span of 15 days, has gone
Right.
from taking Oregon to double overtime to losing
Right.
Drew Aller for the season and, of course, firing James Franklin.
Yeah.
Realistically, Indiana should go 12-0, but I could see, this is going to sound weird, but I could see them losing maybe to UCLA purely because UCLA seems to have gotten better after
Right.
firing Deshaun Foster.
Yes. And that's true. We kind of, because UCLA is like getting better and they seem to have really pulled it together these last 2 weeks. I feel like we're just kind of learning about them right now. So it's really hard to say how they're going to go up against their opponents the remainder of the season. So I could see that being a question mark as well. But that's super exciting, right? The prospect and the idea of Indiana winning out and going 12-0, obviously making it to the Big Ten Conference Championship, would be monumental for your program, historical, and probably super cool as a student.
Yeah, selfishly, I live in Indianapolis. Lucas Oil
Right.
Stadium's about 20 minutes from my house.
Yeah.
So not having to worry about this kind of travel arrangement where we go planes, trains, and automobiles to cover a game, selfishly, that would be cool. But as far
Yeah.
as recruiting goes, as far as the big picture outlook for Curt Cignetti and his legacy in Indiana, I mean, you're talking about him, at least right now, the trajectory things are on, you're talking about him having a statue outside Memorial Stadium in Bloomington when he retires. And that's just unheard of for IU football. There's no other way around it.
And that is actually a really good segue to my next question, because I saw this multiple times today after James Franklin was fired. But do you personally, or those that you work with, your fan base in general, are you at all worried about somebody poaching your head coach, since that's kind of just the nature of college football nowadays?
Yeah, we were talking about it today just among ourselves and student media. And I have a friend who is a Penn State fan.
Okay.
And he asked me, because I'm more into the nitty gritty of this kind of thing. And I told him that realistically, Indiana is not going to have to worry about Cignetti getting poached by Penn State for a couple of reasons. One,
Okay.
Indiana has shown a massive financial commitment to football. And Curt Cignetti has lauded President Pamela Whitten and Athletic Director Scott Dolson for their willingness to invest monetarily into the program. Mark Cuban has a pretty large checkbook, and
Yeah.
he just made a financial contribution to IU football recently. And I'd expect that to happen again if things continue the way they are. They've shown just last year, they signed Cignetti to a contract extension where he's making base $8 million a year. There's a retention bonus in there that makes him one of the 15 or 16 highest paid college coaches in the country. Indiana has the money. And the other part of that is that why would Cignetti leave Indiana? Because he's got a perfect situation. If he goes to Penn State, thinking big picture, James Franklin had a pretty considerable amount of success in Happy
Yeah.
Valley, but things went south really fast and they canned him. At Indiana, Cignetti is doing things, he's taken this program to heights that even a lot of fans did not think it could reach.
Yeah.
His wife loves Bloomington. He is a huge fan of Pam Whitten and Scott Dolson alike. He celebrates with them after every win on the field. And he's got the perfect blueprint in Bloomington. I don't see him leaving Bloomington. And, people will say, oh, well, you're an IU student. Of course you want to keep the best head coach in college football right now. And yeah, there may be a little bias there, but it doesn't seem feasible, especially because Penn State paid over $50 million to fire James Franklin. And then on top of that, they're renovating their stadium and they're spending $600 or $700 million on that. Where's the money going to come from?
That is a good point. And I kind of want to pull up this comment because we're talking about college. Are you at all worried about the NFL?
I had not even considered that.
It's very,
well,
you've had like a whirlwind of a weekend. So it's probably, it's understandable that you haven't even thought about the NFL.
If you would have told me when I was a freshman that I would have to answer a question about an IU football coach potentially going to the NFL, I would have laughed you out of the room.
Yeah.
But realistically, again, I go back to the idea that he loves the fan base. The fans love him. The administration loves him. You would have to give him a blank check and hope that IU can't match it. I think a lot of people are underestimating how much money IU has. They have a ton of money at their disposal. I put them up against anyone in the country. The assistant coach's salary pool that Indiana has is second in the nation only to Ohio State, which I don't think a lot of people know. But IU has a
Right.
massive financial commitment to football. I wouldn't see Sig going to the NFL because, again, if he keeps doing what he's doing in Bloomington, keep in mind, he's in his mid-60s, so realistically, he is in the back end of his career. If he keeps
Yeah.
doing what he's doing in Bloomington, he retires with a statue waiting for him at the football stadium. I don't think he's going to pass that up.
Well, I mean, with the picture that you're painting, that would be pretty hard. And we've seen it so many times of college football coaches going to the NFL and that success just not translating. And it sounds like he seems pretty committed to the overall community and the program itself. And you're absolutely right about like the financial background, just because I think historically and like just the general narratives that take place in college football today, Indiana is not usually one of those schools that are talked about. But you guys are quickly becoming one that people can't stop talking about. So I think we learn a lot. I think everyone outside of Indiana learns a lot about Indiana this season. And it's really interesting to see what you guys can accomplish throughout the remainder of the season and obviously in the playoffs, which is probably, again, super surreal for someone in your position as well as that program in general. If someone asked you at the beginning of the season who you had in the Big Ten Conference Championship, was Indiana there for you?
It was kind of, thinking back, so much has changed so fast.
Yeah.
Looking at the schedule before the year, with the outlook most likely being them at 10-2 with losses to Oregon and Penn State, I would have said no.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think back. I think I would have said probably either Ohio State and Oregon or Ohio State and Penn State, which isn't exactly groundbreaking because everybody
Right.
kind of thought that those would be the three contenders. But Indiana would have been one of the first teams to miss the conference title game.
Yeah. And now it's interesting because I have a hard time imagining Indiana misses the conference championship.
Yeah.
But obviously, so much can happen. There's a lot of season, a lot of games left to play. So it's super exciting. But yeah, I am so great. I'm so happy that you guys had such a great weekend in Eugene. And was it your first time in Oregon?
Yeah. So
Okay.
the only time I've ever gone out west before this was actually last year when Indiana played UCLA at the Rose Bowl.
Mm.
And I'd never been to the Pacific Northwest before, but it seems like a beautiful part of the country. And permitting that I've got free time and maybe some dollars lying around, I'll definitely have to come back because I've heard that Seattle is pretty cool as well, especially Husky Stadium.
Husky Stadium is beautiful. I do give them that. I don't tend to really compliment them very much, but I
Yeah.
do give them that it is a beautiful setting and it can be a tough one. What did you think of the Rose Bowl last year when you went?
The backdrop, the history of that venue is second to none. It was an
Yeah.
incredible experience. And I think back to that game, and I talked about this on air on the student radio broadcast. Excuse me. And we talked about it off air before the game.
Right.
This could be a similar kind of situation where Indiana goes out west, something that Big Ten teams have kind of had trouble with
Yeah.
so far. But Indiana goes out west and they make a statement, and maybe the fans kind of make, they celebrate, make a scene in that respect in the venue after the game. Because that was what happened at UCLA. And that was the
Right.
first time we kind of realized that Indiana might be something. Same thing this year to a bigger degree. But no, the Rose Bowl as a venue is incredible. UCLA football last year was not, but the venue was unbelievable.
Yeah, it's an absolutely beautiful venue. I always say that it's such a shame their program doesn't match that consistently
Yeah.
because the venue, like you said, is second to none. So, kind of taking a look at the Big Ten in general, these first 7 weeks, yep, we're in week 7 now. These first 7 weeks, I would love to know, like, what teams have surprised you outside of the ones that we've talked about already, but kind of thinking about maybe those tier 2, maybe tier 3 teams. Like, which ones have surprised you in a good way and which ones have surprised you in a bad way?
I think I'll start with UCLA as a little bit of both.
Okay. Yeah.
Because the saga with their quarterback, Nico Iamaleava, before the season just was such an icky kind of story.
Right.
because he asked for so much money from Tennessee, and then he got more money and decided that that wasn't enough, and then he left to go back closer to home. And they just fell completely flat on their face and looked dead in the water. Fired Deshaun Foster, and what did they do? 0-4 hosting Penn State. Well, they beat them.
Right.
I They're kind of a wild card, and that's why they make me nervous against Indiana, even though it's in Bloomington. Again, Indiana hasn't lost in Bloomington under Kurt Signetti, but they kind of make me nervous because they're a wild card, and you really don't know what you're going to get. It's clear that Nico is a talented quarterback, and if you're playing with nothing to lose, you're going to say, okay, well, we can spoil somebody else's season. UCLA seems like they might be kind of a frisky team.
Yeah, absolutely. Have there been any other teams that surprised you in a good way or bad way?
Well, I was at the Purdue-Illinois game. It was during Indiana's bye week, and I have a friend who goes to Purdue. He's in the All-American Marching Band, and he was expecting their football team to be better than it was last year with Barry
Yeah.
Odom coming in. And what I saw with Purdue against Illinois is a lot of the same stuff that I saw last year, in that the self-inflicted mistakes, it just seemed like it was kind of the same thing. I expected a little bit more out of Purdue than being a bottom of the barrel Big Ten team, but my friend at Purdue was frustrated because they did not put up a good fight against Minnesota. Full disclosure, I did not watch that game. That's what he told me.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, the bucket game in West Lafayette at the end of the season might be a little bit more of a challenge for Indiana. But realistically, as of right now, I don't see that happening, which for the rivalry's sake, if you like close rivalry games, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. I always go back and forth on that idea of you want your rival to play well and be a good team. So when it comes to the game, it's a good game. I go back and forth on that because I think there's joy in that. There's excitement in that and pulling off that win, but then there's also excitement in kind of just dog smacking them as well.
Yeah.
So I go back and forth on that. I'm not entirely sure if that makes me a better college football fan or not. But I definitely can enjoy and appreciate both sides to that. And I kind of been asking people since I've been doing this for the last several weeks, but what were your thoughts, kind of looking back, what were your thoughts on realignment and the Big Ten welcoming 4 new schools? Was that something that you were super into, or were you pretty hesitant about it? Do you hate the idea of realignment in general? What are your overall thoughts on that?
It's a mixed bag. And
Okay.
I remember when it happened, it started with USC and UCLA, and then Washington and
Right.
Oregon jumped ship as well. It's unfortunate that the Pac-12 was kind of the number one victim in all of this, and that it got blown up.
Yeah.
I think we're going to reach a fever pitch when it comes to TV dictating so much of college sports, because it's coming at the expense of fans. And the great thing about conferences is that when they were based on region, you had these great rivalries and you had different styles of football. I mean, the Pac-12, I remember it as being kind of a wild card conference where there were a lot of high scoring shootout type games, and there was so much history, and it's called the Conference of Champions. And to see it just blown up, it made me sad just as a college sports fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, sure, Indiana, Oregon was a great matchup. It was historic and all these things. And that's one of the good things, is that you can get games like that. But one of the downsides of the Big Ten having 18 teams is that you get a lot of bloat in the middle.
Yeah.
You got a bunch of teams where, one, there's very little scheduling parity because, and I think it's, I don't remember who it is. I think it's Penn State. They played Oregon, and then they play Ohio State and Indiana back to back.
Yeah.
Now, Ohio State and Indiana and Penn State were all in the Big Ten East, so those games would have been played on a semi-annual basis anyway.
Right.
But these schedules can be so soft from team to team, and Indiana benefited from that last year, full disclosure. I just think it creates a lot of bloat, and I don't like how big the Big Ten has gotten. It should not have 18 teams in it.
Yeah, it has gotten big. It's so crazy to think that it does have 18 teams. And I know that it's kind of a consistent conversation that we are having, that college football is headed to a direction of 2 mega conferences, where it basically looks like the Big Ten and the SEC. And so this kind of contradicts what you just told me, but if the Big Ten were to welcome additional teams, are there any that you prefer or think would be fun? Because I know some schools in the ACC have been tossed around, such as Virginia or UNC, maybe even Clemson. Are there any other schools in the country that you think would be a good addition to the Big Ten?
Um, well, the simple answer is no, because then
Yeah,
you'd be talking about like a 20-team conference, and that's
it's
just
true.
no. We cannot do that. But if we were to do that, let's just say strictly looking at the good, adding historically good football programs, eye-popping brands that'll draw viewership, that'll draw fans in. I'm going to say Clemson would be pretty high on the list. I'm going to say, strictly looking at football, I mean, Florida
Yeah,
State clearly wanted out of the ACC. They probably still want out of the ACC, just like
right.
Clemson does. Those two would be probably my first calls. But I can't see an avenue where adding any more teams to the Big Ten is a good thing for the long-term outlook of college sports.
And I totally agree. I always say this is like selfish of me, but now that Oregon's in the Big Ten, I have very little interest in adding more teams to the conference because
Yeah.
I'm good. Like I'm content and happy with where we're at and super excited for like all the new history to be built for Oregon as a program. But yeah, it's so weird to think that we could be headed towards this direction of two mega conferences where we even have to have that conversation of like who else gets added to the Big Ten or who else gets added to the SEC because kind of going back to what you were saying with the Pac-12, there's so much history instilled in these conferences and where these teams have been to kind of just destroy that for them to join another conference and to kind of reach this point of two mega conferences seems just crazy in the bigger picture of like the landscape of college football.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it's a whole can of worms.
it is, yeah, and so many people have differing opinions on that. And now we enter the conversations of like, okay, well, do conference championships even matter? Rivalries don't even matter that much
Yeah.
anymore. Like the entire playoff system has kind of messed with that. And even kind of just this was said a couple of times this weekend, like it's similar to the NFL where like 1 to 2 losses isn't the end of the world anymore. Like this is
Yeah.
kind of just it can be normalized and you can still succeed. I mean, look at Ohio State last year. They had 2 regular season losses and went on to win the national championship. So
Yeah.
it's so weird to think that like 10 years ago, we probably never would have like thought that like a 2 loss team would be winning the national championship.
Yeah, I think the good thing about the 12-team playoff is that it gives more teams the opportunity to do something.
Yeah.
But coming with that, it's everything's dictated by TV money, and it gets messy because at face value, that is what the 12-team playoff does. But
Right.
I mean, who was standing at the end? It was Ohio State and Notre Dame, and they were clearly the best teams last year, and they showed that. But at the end of the day, you kind of got two of the biggest programs in college football standing, and there was no Cinderella sort of to speak of outside of Arizona State for
Yeah.
making it to the CFP and Boise State as well. But Boise State, I mean, once they got to the CFP, it was clear that at least in that game, from what I remember, Penn State was a step above, if my memory
Yeah.
serves correctly.
I remember it being that way too. Like
Yeah.
it was clear they were not on the same level. And so I have one last question for you. Well, two, but kind of go hand in hand. So my first is if you think about it, and this is probably just my projection right now, obviously things could change with the remainder of the regular season, but if Ohio State and Indiana end up in the conference championship, what does anything concern you about that game, or do you feel so confident in this Indiana program right now that you think they can take down Ohio State?
I think, wow, that's a good question, because I think back to the shoe last year and how terribly that went for Indiana and how much flack Indiana got after that game. Kind of like, oh, here's the fraud getting exposed. I mean, Ohio State's defense has gotten, arguably better than
I
last
agree.
year. And last year, their defense was insanely good.
Yeah.
I think Ohio State would have the edge over Indiana, if nothing else, just based on that defense alone. It would be a really good game. I think you'd have overwhelmingly IU fans there, just because
I
they traveled
agree.
well to Eugene, and Indianapolis is a hub of IU fans, as you would expect. But
Right.
I would be skeptical about Indiana in that game right now. Now, I'm happy to be
Yeah.
proven wrong in December, but I would be extremely skeptical about Indiana in that game. And who knows? If they go 12-0 in the regular season and their only loss is in the Big Ten championship, in the grand scheme of the playoff, it might not matter that much. But I
Yeah.
think Ohio State would have the edge.
Yeah. And I think it would be such a good game. Like I was kind of bummed to not see Ohio State on your guys' regular season schedule
Yeah,
because I just think that would be a really good game. So if that's the one that we get in the conference championship, I think that would be really exciting. And then
absolutely.
this doesn't have to do with Indiana, but do you think Ohio State finally beats Michigan this year?
That game is at the Big House. Bryce Underwood as the quarterback for Michigan. I mean, they beat him at the shoe last year. Anything's possible.
Right.
Um, I I don't know. I want to stay away from that because it's that rivalry is one of the best in college football. And I
Yeah.
remember I was walking around the tailgates before the IU Purdue game last year because my friends came down and I wanted to say hi to them. And I turned on the game at one of the tailgates. I was looking at it and I said, "What?"
Right.
Because I had just watched Ohio State convincingly stomp Indiana, and you're telling me
Right.
they couldn't beat Michigan at home?
Yeah.
I mean I could see Ohio State winning in the Big House, but after last year, I don't trust Ryan Day in that game.
It's tricky. And like you said, it's one of the best rivalries, if not the best rivalry in college football. And weird things happen during rivalry games. Like we would have guessed that last season. Like you
Yeah,
said, after convincingly beating Indiana, losing to Michigan, especially with the state of that Michigan team last
yeah,
season. And it's so funky and it's so weird how rivalry games kind of bring that out. Like we never know what's coming. But
yeah,
that's definitely one that I always look forward to every single season.
yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining me tonight, Nick. I really appreciate it. I know you're in PDX waiting to fly out and fly back home. Like I said, I'm so glad you had such a great weekend. And I'm super happy that your experience in Eugene was great. And congratulations to your Hoosiers. Can you tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
It's funny because if you go to my Twitter at Nick Rodecap, NickRodecap, you will find a little bit down that I got quote tweeted by Indiana's defensive coordinator Brian Haynes earlier this week because I pointed out at least to me, strikingly large size disparity between Indiana's D line and Oregon's offensive line. And
I
Haynes
saw
quoted
that
it,
tweet.
said, "Yep,"
Yeah.
he said, "Didn't realize how small and defenseless we're going to be. Oh no!" And then whew, yeah, I got a friend on the team, and he said they talked about that a lot. So you probably have seen that tweet. But I post all my work there, my written work, my broadcast stuff on my Twitter, um, and the video stuff that I do for the Hoosier Network as well. I'll be covering IU basketball, although I think off the top of my head, this is probably the least anybody has cared about IU basketball in October in a
Right.
very, very long time.
Well, that's exciting for different
Yeah,
reasons, right? But I'm actually excited for college basketball. Not because I want football to be over, but I always like it when it starts trickling in and we get that excitement from basketball as well. And this is such a great college basketball conference. So that is exciting. But yes, so I will also post your tweet or your handles as well for people to be able to find you. But thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. Please be sure to like and subscribe to keep up with all the Total Coverage Sports content that I'm creating as well as all the other awesome creators. And we will be back here next Sunday to talk week 8 of Big